Between 1948 and 1979, Iran and Israel maintained relatively friendly and cooperative relations, largely shaped by shared strategic interests rather than ideological alignment. After the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, Iran, under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, did not officially recognize Israel de jure, but was one of the few Muslim-majority countries to acknowledge it de facto. The Shah's pro-Western orientation and opposition to pan-Arab nationalism positioned Iran and Israel on the same side of the regional political divide. Both countries viewed the rise of Arab nationalism, particularly under Egyptian leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, as a threat to their security and interests. This period saw significant covert collaboration, especially in intelligence and military matters. The Israeli intelligence agency Mossad and the Iranian secret police Savak shared information and coordinated operations. Israel assisted Iran in various development projects, including agriculture, military modernization, and oil exports. In this return, Iran supplied Israel with vital oil during times when Arab countries imposed embargoes on the Jewish state. Economic relations flourished behind the scenes, with trade and cooperation kept discreet due to Iran's sensitive position in the Muslim world. Despite public opposition to Israel among many Iranians, especially within the religious establishment, the Shah maintained the alliance because he saw it as beneficial to Iran's modernization efforts and as a counterbalance to Arab states. This pragmatic relationship came to an abrupt end in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution, which overthrew the Shah and brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power, fundamentally transforming Iran's foreign policy and stance toward Israel. In 1979, Iran underwent a seismic political shift with the Islamic Revolution, which overthrew Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and brought Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and a theocratic regime to power. This marked a dramatic turning point in Iran-Israel relations. The new Islamic Republic rejected the Shah's pro-Western foreign policy and instead adopted an ideology rooted in anti-imperialism and Islamic solidarity, which included a deep opposition to the existence of Israel. Khomeini denounced Israel as an illegitimate, oppressive, and colonialist entity and began referring to it as the Zionist regime. Immediately following the revolution, Iran severed all diplomatic and economic ties with Israel. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was closed and handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, symbolizing Iran's new support for the Palestinian cause. The Islamic Republic declared that supporting the Palestinians was a religious and moral duty for Muslims worldwide, and it positioned itself as a leader of resistance against Israel. Anti-Israeli rhetoric became a cornerstone of the regime's identity, often used to unify the population and legitimize its revolutionary ideology. This ideological transformation turned Iran from a quiet partner of Israel into one of its most vocal and determined enemies. The revolution replaced pragmatic cooperation with ideological hostility, laying the foundation for decades of enmity, proxy conflicts, and regional rivalry. The events of 1979 not only ended bilateral ties, but also began a new era in which Iran actively sought to undermine Israel through political, financial, and later military means. In the 1980s, Iran and Israel became publicly hostile toward each other, yet engaged in limited and secret cooperation due to shifting regional dynamics. Following the Islamic Revolution, Iran's leadership continued its strong anti-Israel stance, supporting the Palestinian cause and denouncing Israel in ideological and religious terms. However, the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq War in 1980 significantly altered Iran's strategic priorities. Faced with a devastating conflict against Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Iran found itself isolated and in need of weapons, spare parts, and military support. Despite Iran's public hostility, Israel saw Iraq as a greater threat at the time and was willing to quietly aid Iran to weaken a mutual enemy. This led to clandestine cooperation, most notably through arms sales. Israel, with the tacit approval of the United States, provided Iran with weapons and spare parts that were crucial to keeping Iran's military functioning. This cooperation became part of the larger Iran-Contra affair, in which the United States secretly facilitated arms sales to Iran and used the proceeds to fund Contra rebels in Nicaragua. While this back-channel cooperation was strategic and short-term, it did not alter the broader trajectory of Iranian-Israeli hostility. Iran continued to denounce Israel in public, and by the late 1980s, it began to strengthen its ties with militant groups opposed to Israel, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon. This decade marked a complex phase in the relationship. Bitter ideological opposition and regional rivalry on the surface, coupled with pragmatic and temporary coordination behind the scenes, driven by immediate security concerns. In the 1990s, Iran's hostility toward Israel became more entrenched and took on a more active and operational form through its growing support for anti-Israel militant groups. After the end of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, Iran redirected its focus outward, aiming to expand its influence in the Middle East by positioning itself as the leader of the resistance against Israel and Western powers. Central to this strategy was its support for groups committed to Israel's destruction, particularly Hezbollah in Lebanon, and later Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Palestinian territories. Iran provided Hezbollah with funding, weapons, training, and ideological support, helping it to evolve from a local militia into a powerful paramilitary and political force. Hezbollah, backed by Iran and operating from southern Lebanon, engaged in frequent clashes with Israeli forces, especially during and after Israel's occupation of parts of Lebanon. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, particularly its Quds Force, played a key role in this relationship, facilitating arms transfers and military training. At the same time, Iran began to deepen its ties with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, groups that opposed the peace process between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, particularly the Oslo Accords. Iran viewed the peace negotiations as a betrayal of the Palestinian cause and sought to empower factions that continued to embrace armed struggle against Israel. Through this support, Iran aimed to undermine both Israel's security and moderate Arab states that recognized or were moving toward recognizing Israel. During this decade, Iran's actions shifted from ideological opposition to tangible, sustained efforts to weaken Israel through proxy forces. Its strategy relied on building and maintaining a network of non-state actors committed to armed resistance, marking a significant evolution in its regional policy and solidifying its role as Israel's primary adversary in the Middle East. In the 2000s, Iran and Israel's conflict intensified with the emergence of nuclear tensions, which became a central issue in their adversarial relationship. The turning point came in 2002, when an Iranian dissident group revealed the existence of secret nuclear facilities at Natanz and Arak, raising suspicions in the international community that Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons under the guise of a civilian energy program. Israel viewed this development as an existential threat, fearing that a nuclear-armed Iran would not only shift the balance of power in the Middle East, but also embolden Iran's support for anti-Israel groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Throughout the decade, Israel campaigned aggressively on the world stage to raise alarm over Iran's nuclear ambitions. It urged the United States, the European Union, and the United Nations to impose sanctions and prevent Iran from enriching uranium to weapons-grade levels. Israeli leaders consistently warned that Iran was approaching a point of no return and did not rule out unilateral military action to stop Iran's nuclear progress. At the same time, Iran insisted its program was for peaceful purposes, but its secrecy and defiance of international inspections deepened Israeli fears. The 2000s also saw a growing shadow war between the two countries. Israel increased surveillance and intelligence operations targeting Iranian scientists and facilities. While tensions did not lead to open war, the sense of urgency in Israel grew year by year, especially as Iran continued to advance its enrichment capabilities. The nuclear issue overshadowed all other aspects of the Iran-Israel conflict, adding a layer of potential catastrophe to an already volatile relationship. It transformed the rivalry from one rooted in regional politics and proxy battles into a direct confrontation with global security implications. In the 2010s, the conflict between Iran and Israel escalated into a more covert and technologically advanced phase, marked by cyber warfare, targeted assassinations, and intensified regional proxy conflicts. One of the most significant developments was the use of cyber attacks as a strategic weapon. In 2010, the Stuxnet computer worm, believed to have been developed jointly by Israel and the United States, was discovered after it disrupted Iran's uranium enrichment at the Natanz facility. This marked a new kind of warfare, as Israel sought to delay Iran's nuclear progress without launching a direct military strike. Alongside cyber operations, a series of assassinations targeted Iranian nuclear scientists between 2010 and 2012. Several were killed in operations widely attributed to Israeli intelligence, although Israel never officially claimed responsibility. These attacks were intended to sabotage Iran's nuclear program and send a warning about the consequences of continuing it. Iran responded by blaming Israel and the United States, vowing revenge and accelerating parts of its program in defiance. At the same time, the regional dimension of the Iran-Israel conflict deepened, especially in Syria. Iran, through its Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah, became heavily involved in supporting the Assad regime during the Syrian civil war. Israel, in turn, carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting Iranian weapons shipments, military bases, and Hezbollah operatives, aiming to prevent Iran from establishing a permanent military presence near Israel's northern border. These strikes became routine, but remained below the threshold of full-scale war. In Lebanon, Iran's support for Hezbollah continued to grow, and in Gaza, it increased funding and weapons to Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Israel saw these groups as Iranian proxies used to open multiple fronts in the event of a larger conflict. By the end of the decade, the Iran-Israel rivalry had evolved into a multifaceted shadow war involving advanced technology, espionage, proxy militias, and constant, low-intensity conflict across the region, with both sides preparing for the possibility of a larger confrontation. In the 2020s, the Iran-Israel conflict escalated further. Marked by more direct confrontation, increased proxy activity, and shifting regional alliances that deepened tensions. A major development came in 2020 with the signing of the Abraham Sea Accords, in which several Arab countries, such as the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, normalized relations with Israel. Iran viewed these agreements as a betrayal by fellow Muslim nations and as part of a US-backed strategy to isolate and encircle the Islamic Republic. This prompted Tehran to increase its efforts to rally and arm anti-Israel groups across the region, especially in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Gaza, and Yemen. During this period, the shadow war between Iran and Israel intensified. Iranian tankers, military, convoys, and weapons shipments were frequently targeted by Israeli airstrikes and covert sabotage, particularly in Syria and at sea. Iran responded with cyber attacks and drone operations against Israeli and allied targets. One of the most significant moments came in 2020 with the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, Iran's top nuclear scientist, widely attributed to Israel. This event further inflamed tensions and led to renewed vows by Iran to accelerate the nuclear program. The rivalry reached new levels of danger in 2023 and 2024, especially during and after the Israel-Hamas conflict that erupted in October 2023. Iran strongly backed Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, providing them with weapons, intelligence, and political support. As the conflict deepened and Israeli military actions expanded, Iran increased its rhetoric and logistical support for its regional network of allied militias. In April 2024, for the first time in history, Iran launched a direct missile and drone attack on Israeli territory in retaliation for an Israeli strike on its consulate in Damascus. Though most of the projectiles were intercepted, the event marked a significant escalation, breaking the long-standing pattern of indirect confrontation and proxy warfare. This direct attack signaled a dangerous new phase in the conflict, with Iran no longer limiting its responses to proxies, and Israel reinforcing its commitment to preemptive strikes against Iranian infrastructure and leadership. As of the mid-2020s, The Iran-Israel conflict remains one of the most volatile and complex rivalries in the Middle East, increasingly shaped by technological warfare, shifting alliances, and the risk of open military conflict.